Welcome to the Creative Life Podcast. My name is Caroline and I am your host. Today on the podcast, we have musician Kirsten Morgan. I've known Kirsten for 20 years, and for the first 19 of those years, I knew her as my boss. But I guess that doesn't really sum it up because she was so much more than a boss. She was a leader, of course, an extraordinary artist and pedagogue, but also colleague and mentor and supporter and friend. And now, in the last year, she's been enjoying a well-deserved retirement after many, many decades in the music education field. And now she's finding in her retirement that having time has allowed her to pursue her musicianship and her artistry and performing and practicing once again, but also really delving into a new passion and profession, really, of being a composer. So I'm delighted to talk to Kirsten and hear what she's been up to in this first year of her retirement. Or as she says it, it's not really retirement. It's just a new chapter. It's where she is now. So without further ado, here's Kirsten. Hi, Kier. Thank you for coming to talk to us.
Hi, Caroline.
It's great to see you and have you on the podcast. And so I'm hoping you can just start us off by saying, what is it that you do? You just recently retired. So what were you doing and what are you doing now, I guess is the question.
Okay. Well, first of all, Caroline, thank you so much for having me today. It's really looking forward to our conversation. So I recently retired, but I think basically because I'm a musician, we never retire, but I retired from the work that I was doing. And I served as an executive director of a music school here in Manhattan, in New York City, for the past 26 years. And doing that, I embraced a lot of different things. So there I was first, I came to the school. What pulled me in, what drew me in is that I'm a musician. I'm also a teacher and I'm a leader. And so all of those aspects of my life is what I have been focusing on in my professional world over 2.5 decades at this school, and also doing work outside of the school, serving on a couple of different boards and so forth that are arts oriented because I felt responsibility to do so.
And you retired last summer.
And I retired last summer at the end of June. It was a really busy year. Getting to that point where I really wanted to feel like it was the right time for me to move to the next phase of my life, and that it was really the right time for the school as well. And so it was getting, a lot of things together. And you and I have spoke. I mean, one of the things that I really value, and we mentioned recently, was working through the process of accreditation, right?
Yeah.
And so last year happened to be that year. We were on that 10-year cycle for the school. And so there was a lot of work that was done in terms of self-study work and bringing that writing together with a whole, committee of people, right? And then analyzing what we learned together and then sort of moving forward and looking at what it meant for us in terms of like the future of the school, evaluation, projections, planning, all of that. And having visitors come in to really see what is this all about in action. So for me personally and professionally, it was such a highlight for me last year to have this time where we were all together and we were just sharing the magic of the school and having visitors to come in to see all of that. So anyway, it was such a big year, and there were many other things that occurred as well, but I couldn't help myself from thinking about accreditation because I love going through that process. Otherwise you're just sort of, every day is so full, and there are so many things that happen, and there are things that, you're working on in the day to day, but things that are also really far out there in the future. And then there's just this stuff that comes up, and you can kind of go in circles. And accreditation gives you that opportunity to just sort of stand back and to pause and take a deep breath and to write and to think and reflect and analyze and look at how all of the different parts are really connected, and how you look at that connection to then sort of shape what needs to happen in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think as someone who was a part of that process with you, it felt like in many ways like a bit of a capstone on your time at the school, because you had announced at the beginning of the year that you were going to retire. So in some ways, I think to some of us, it felt like we were writing about and thinking about and presenting a body of work of where the school had come, like what had happened over the last 10 years, really, since the last time it was written. And it felt like a capstone in some ways, I think, to a lot of the projects you had been working on. So yeah, it was a good year. You're right. It was kind of it was a nice
so good
fire. It was a nice year to wrap up what you were doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I should mention that, because I think it's important for people that are listening that may not know, it's not typical for a community music school like this one to go through such a process.
Right.
It's not something that's required of community music schools. It's something it's an extra thing that you might choose to do. An extra makes it sound like it's on top of something else, but that's the wrong word. But I mean to say that it's a choice to be that reflective over the work, and not all schools do it. It is a very special thing, unique thing.
And for me, I really felt it took the school a while to engage in the work the first time we did it, to make sure everybody was really thinking, yes, this is important and we need to do this. But for me, it seems like it's the responsible thing to do. Here's this process that we can engage in as an entire community together that is really going to help us grow and become better than we currently are. So we have to do it. There's no choice, so I feel so good about all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then what have you been doing now in your new act? You've retired from your, I wouldn't even say 9 to 5, because you were in the building much more than 9 to 5. So,
right. We call it a 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. I think it's just like a complete, it's a 24/7 way of living for so many years.
So many years. So you got off of that track, and what did you do what did you do the first day? You weren't at work. What did you do that first day?
Well, the first day it was like bringing things home and setting up, right? Setting up a place for myself here, at home that could be sort of like, my home studio, which I had, but it's also incorporating pictures and, art and so forth, and my books and all of these things, because I poured through all this stuff in my office and kept the things that felt most important for me to have that were my own things. And then, just bringing that home and setting up and my music studio to prepare for the future for myself as a musician, so it's making that space. And of course, central to all of this was just, my spending time with my family. So thinking about like what I'm currently doing. So I play the flute. I've played the flute since I was 11 years old. And I also play the piano, and I've played since I was 6. And what led me to, become an executive director of a music school here in the city is that it is music. I mean, music has always been central to me. And I always wanted to be a musician since I was a young child. I have 2 sisters. They're both artists. And when we were little, there was this recording. My mom would have records playing in the house, and she'd have a whole range of records. But I love Stravinsky's Firebird Suite. And
Mhm.
she would put Stravinsky on all the time. And so my sisters and I made up this dramatization around Firebird. And so we would hide, behind the couch. And then when we get to this certain part with the finale, we'd come out and we would move like these birds all around the living room. And I think that memory is probably when I was about 4 years old,
Mhm.
but I remember it so deeply in my entire body of the sound of that recording and what it felt like to move and be musical in that way. And soon thereafter, my grandfather he brought me some recordings of Pablo Casals playing the Bach cello suites. So these were like my early memories of music, and I fell in love with these pieces. I fell in love with Bach, and I fell in love with Stravinsky. And I remember like lying on the floor and listening to the Bach cello suites. And it it really shaped me. And I started piano when I was 6, and I remember going to my teacher's house, like just crossing the street and cutting through the hedges and going to her house and sitting in this window and playing, this baby grand piano and learning to read music, and the relationship that I had with my teacher, and baking bread together after our lesson every Saturday. But one thing led to another, and I just always knew that I had to be a musician, and it's what drove it for me. Everything that I did and sort of my life's path, and where that took me, as a teenager, and then to my studies and so forth when I started going to school, you know.
So when you went to school, I mean, it sounds like you already knew this was going to be your path. You wanted
Mhm.
to go to music
Mhm.
school, and that's
Mhm.
what you're going to do.
Yeah, without
So
a doubt.
yeah,
Without a doubt. And
how did
so yeah, so I went to school here, like my undergraduate, went to a conservatory here in Manhattan, flute performance major. Um Practiced many hours a day. It's what I did,
that?
really disciplined work. Um, and then after graduation, gosh, this is like so long ago, but, you know, so after graduation, then, being a freelancer and needing to create, like doing a lot of freelance work, but also needing to create opportunities for myself and for others. So we started a small chamber orchestra that we had so that we could play and play repertoire together and and so forth. And then one thing led to another, and I started teaching, and I started teaching in the school that we're talking about, and taking more teacher training courses. And I also really at that point fell in love with the Dalcroze approach to teaching music. And some I spent a summer in an intensive here in the city that also, when I'm just thinking about music and feeling like fully integrated as a player and fully integrated as a mover and experiencing music, this was a really exciting time in my life. Um, then I started a music ed program in a particular school here in the city, and at the time it just didn't feel like it was the right thing. Like I was looking for something else. So then I ended up going to another graduate school, and I was thinking of designing my own degree. So at this point, as a, playing flute. Piano, I studied all the way through. So even when I was in college, I was taking some lessons at this conservatory.
Yeah.
And um, and then also doing teaching, group music teaching, well, actually teaching flute, teaching piano, teaching theory and musicianship classes, but really thinking about the future and what did I really want to, how did I want to bring this all together in my life?
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to design my own degree, and I went to this graduate program, and they said, you should be in the leadership program. So that's what I did. So I ended up getting my MS in educational leadership, and then started just folding other things in along the way. And then also just fell in love with organizational development and institutional development and adult development and how we build, artistic cultures in schools, and what do we need to do to support that. Because I always, I, with the school where I was for so long, it's a school for young children. It's a school for elementary school, for teenagers, for adults. But I really, really, really wanted it to be a musician's music school. And I wanted it to be this rare place where people love to be every single day to support one another and each other's creativity, and that we would work alongside one another, and that the mission and the values that we all believed in and shaped together would drive the work that we were doing. And that it was it. And I also think, Caroline, it's rare to be in a place that you can have excellence where it's not, and you can have excellence and rigor, but it's not going to be competitive. It's like you're going to
Right.
want to say, like, okay, I've got this idea, I want to try this thing out. Or you've got this idea, how can we support each other? Oh yeah, let's go for it. And I
Yeah.
think that's something, the idea of like, let's go for it. And I know that's how you think. And that's
Yeah.
like, yeah.
I think that's the school that you're speaking of, and we're being diplomatic by not naming names.
Right.
We're just not in a weird way, just because we want to be appropriate. But so I would say that that's definitely the case. When I first came to the school, I was referred to the school by another colleague who was teaching there at the time, and I remember asking her, like, "Oh, well, tell me about it. What is it like?" And it sticks in my mind what she said to me. She said, "It's a fantastic community of musicians."
Mm-hmm.
That was how she described it.
Isn't that so great?
And I remember thinking, like, that's really an interesting way to describe a school, right? And so, it felt like, and it still feels like everybody is there to lift everybody else up creatively. And whereas my experiences in music schools prior to that and conservatory life was that wasn't always the case. And was that your experience in your conservatory life? Was it competitive in
It
that
was
way?
competitive. Yeah, no, it was definitely competitive.
And the conservatories can be quite competitive.
The year I entered, they took two people, two flute
Players.
majors. Yeah. So it was very competitive. It's also a really long time ago, and being here in Manhattan, I mean, this was, Caroline, this was in the 1970s. This was in the late 70s.
Yeah.
In Manhattan, it was a different story
Mm-hmm.
then.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, yeah, it was very competitive. And I don't know about like the lifting up of others, it
Right.
was each person sort of on their path and figuring out their own path and thinking, so when we graduate, we play in an orchestra,
Mm-hmm.
what are we doing? And so then it was the figuring out of what are we doing and really pursuing these different pathways. But there's this way for everybody to do well,
Right.
and
There
everybody
is
to
a way.
pursue what
There
they
is a
want to
way.
pursue. Mm-hmm.
Right. Did you feel like in your flute studies, and I guess your piano studies as well, were you given a lot of creative autonomy to make choices about what you were playing and what you were the choices, that sort of thing, or?
I should say, well, growing up on the piano side, I always liked to improvise, and
Mhm.
I like to create things and make things up. Um, in my flute studies, it was more like prescribed with, with scales and etudes, right? And pieces that we're working on in standard repertoire. Um, yeah.
Was it like that
So,
all the way through your conservatory life as well? Sort of like,
yeah,
the
it
pieces
was.
you're doing, and this is what.
It was.
Yeah.
I also really started to explore chamber music. I really, really loved chamber music when I was in, conservatory life. And I really liked doing that. I also decided that I wanted to sing in the chorus in this school. So I was just like pursuing different things at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in terms of the creativity, being entrepreneurial
Mhm.
upon graduation, being entrepreneurial and creative in that way, and sort of trying to figure out what's the way forward here. Um, and then you know, eventually finding a way and continuing to find a way. And I think um, being able to be more creative as life went on was really, really exciting. Yeah.
Interesting. Is
Yeah.
Do you think that once you weren't primarily a performer for your primary job, once you got
Mm-hmm.
more into education and
Mm-hmm.
school leadership, did that give you some creative license with your flute playing?
Um, I think, well, things widened for me.
Mm.
There are just all these ways to be a musician and to be a music educator, a teacher, to be a leader. So it's really, for me, my musicianship and my leadership feels very full because there are so many different components to it, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, like now you're coming back to
mhm,
your time is your own, and you
mhm,
can choose to pick up your flute whenever you like now,
yeah, which
right?
I'm doing every day, mind
Which
you.
that was my other question. It's like, are you
Okay.
playing a lot, and what are you choosing to play? Are you choosing to play, what you were playing before when you were a
Mhm,
traditional conservatory
mhm,
classically trained flute student, or are
mhm,
you um dabbling in other things? Where is it taking you now?
mhm, mhm. So, so I find myself always starting in the same way. It's like my instrument comes out, I start with long tones. I just, it helps me get centered. Helps the sound feel right. Like just starting slowly and really focusing on sound and starting to just sort of take off from there with some daily exercises, but really honing in on sound first.
Hmm.
And what's so nice is I've been playing a couple of hours a day, which I really love.
So great.
And yeah, it's really great. And basically I've been playing Bach and doing some Telemann. And if someone asks me to play something, I'll say yes, it's that kind of thing. And so it's not saying no, it's like saying yes. And that's a really good thing, you
Hmm.
know? So anyway, it's good. And doing some performing.
Oh, good. Are you playing new things you've never played before, or are you revisiting old friends?
Um, I've done some stuff a little bit with flute and organ. And so that's been new, you know? But I will play old things, like if I'm playing Bach sonatas, they always feel new every day, right?
Even if you
That's
played
the
them for
thing.
years and years.
Even
Yeah.
if that's right. It always feels new and it always feels fresh. So, and the other thing, Caroline, I want to mention too is that I love to compose. I love to compose. So what I'm doing, musically now is I'm practicing and I'm composing. And the thing that I have now that I didn't have so much of before was time. And it's the most amazing thing because you get pulled in and you need, like, if I'm going to write, if I'm going to compose, I need chunks of time and I need time to think and I need time to just like sit down. And when I compose, for the most part, some of the things the pieces that I feel really good about that I've done, basically they're written for voice and piano.
Mhm.
And I typically, what happens is I'll I'll basically just start hearing something in my head and I might not even, like, I won't be home and I'll try and remember it. So I'll just write it down in numbers because that helps me remember. Like, even if I just write it down on my phone in
Yeah.
terms of the numbers, you know, scale degrees and so forth, then when I get home, I can just transfer it over. So when I'm composing, I typically sit at the piano just with manuscript paper and pencil. Most recently, I wrote this piece that is written for SATB choir, unaccompanied a cappella choir. And I found myself just being like lost in time doing it. Like I would sit down and I would think to myself, actually, Caroline, it was like I'd wake up in the morning. I wake up in the morning and it was like, do I even need to like have breakfast? Can I just go right ahead and start composing?
Wow.
And
Wow.
so sitting at the piano with my manuscript paper, right, and my pencil, and having it be really quiet in my apartment, right,
Mhm.
and being able to write and having the whole thing start to evolve because I started with this melodic line, but then it started to wind and open up, and I felt so good about how it was starting to evolve. And I needed to take the this text that I was using because it wasn't at all symmetrical. It wasn't like this poem that was symmetrical. I needed to find the places where it was going to repeat and where there was a certain chunk of it that was going to keep coming back as a refrain. But then there were going to be these other sections where we would hear it, but harmonically, it would start to shift in new ways, and it would get really, really rich in its texture. Um, and the other thing that was new for me with this was setting text. It was actually scored for soprano, mezzo, alto, tenor, um, baritone, bass. So setting text for multiple voices,
Wow. Yeah. That's
is a different thing than setting a text for soprano and
Mhm.
piano.
Did you
So
go into it with sort of once you chose the text, with sort of a traditional form in mind that you were trying to work within? Like, did you give yourself any sort of um, boundaries for what you were composing, or was it just sort of really open improvisational at the start?
it wasn't really improvisational because it was an ensemble piece that was going to be scored for voices. It started with the mezzos and then just sort of the harmonies around the mezzos, but there was definitely a sense of form and phrase to it.
I'm wondering if, because I think there's been a lot of people that talk about how when you're trying to create something, really from
Mm-hmm.
scratch, that we actually do better when we have some boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
to some rules imposed, on it.
Mm-hmm.
As if it is total free form without any
Mm-mm.
rules, it becomes quite difficult to get going. But sometimes
Mm-hmm.
that the rules, I'm saying, the boundaries, the parameters of what the task is, sometimes help us, free us to be more creative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you knew it was going to be a multi-part choral piece from the start, and that you wanted it to be, centered
Definitely.
on the mezzo melody line, and like you're saying, and kind of you made those choices from the start.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I knew that. And yeah, no, I felt very clear about that. And I got to this point where I honestly, this piece would wake me up at night. I kept hearing it in my head,
Uh-huh.
and I was just having such a great time writing it. And I thought to myself, even if, I was going to write it, even if it was never performed. Like that didn't matter. This was just the next thing that I was going to do, that
Yeah.
I had to write this. And then eventually, so when I was done really with writing it down, like pencil to paper, then I transferred it over to MuseScore.
Mm-hmm.
And then, that was time again, like so much time in getting it all set and getting it in a way that it's like, if I were to just give this to somebody, are they able to really understand everything that I've written here? And, you know, just thinking of the voices, thinking of ranges, thinking of the vowels, everything that
Mm-hmm.
people were going to be singing on. And happily, I shared it with this choral conductor, and he said, "Yeah, we'd love to sing it." So it was performed, you know, in January, and then I thought to myself, like, my next piece is going to be for choir with piano. Because I
Great.
also feel really comfortable. I feel really comfortable writing in that way,
Mm-hmm.
because I've done, as a teacher, and I mean, focusing on creativity, like
Yeah.
some of my happiest times are with young children in the classroom, teaching and being the improviser for their movement.
Yeah.
Caroline, I
Yeah.
mean, just like incredible work. And this is through all the Dalcroze teaching, that I did over a very long period of time. I just absolutely loved it. I loved like creating this art space where the children would enter each week, and they'd come in and, be barefoot and put their little shoes underneath the chairs and come to the rug ready to make music and be their full, amazing, incredible selves, right? And
Yeah.
all the creativity that went into those classes.
It's so open. It's so open. For the listener who may not be familiar with Dalcroze Eurythmics, I'll put some resources in the show notes
Mm-hmm.
if you're interested in learning more about what it is. But it, Kirsten, you can probably speak more eloquently about it than I can. But it's essentially, it's the marriage of natural movement and musicality, and
Mm-hmm.
really how we naturally move to music and how music naturally suits human movement as well. And finding ways for students and people to access their musicality through their natural movements. Is that,
Exactly.
yeah. And so
Exactly.
it's very responsive. It's very immediate. When you teach those kinds of classes and structure those kinds of experiences, the preparation it's not set in stone. It's
Mm-hmm.
more, it's preparing yourself to be ready to respond to
Exactly.
what's happening. Um, it's a very in the moment heightened sense of creativity, in
It,
my
yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. That's exactly it, Caroline. I I love the approach. It's so musical. It connects the mind, the body, the ear, right? You're fully integrated when you're engaged in music making in this way. And you know, before the children would come in, because I would teach a couple of classes a week, and they're young, right? So we're talking 3-year-olds, 4s, 5s, kindergarten
Right.
class. I would, before the children would come in, I look at my roll book, and I look at every child, and I'd think about them before they'd come in the room, and just sort of, you know,
Who are
just
they?
what they're, who are they? Who
Who
are
are
these
they?
precious
How do
children?
they
And
carry
how are they
themselves?
coming in the room? And, just what is unique and individual about each child. And
Mhm.
then I would meet each of them at the door and they'd come in and we'd start at the beginning and we would shape an entire class together. Um, and I loved accompanying their movement, like using a drum. Like you'd feel really in sync, watching children move and playing for their natural movement using a drum, and then eventually extending that and going over to the piano and just sort of going right from the drum to the piano and being able to play for the character, of their movement, the tempo of their movement, everything that's going on there.
Listener, imagine if you were walking down the street to your own theme music, your own
Mm-hmm.
customized theme music as you moved that fit your movements and your character and your personality and your mood. That's what it's like.
Mm-hmm.
The
Mm-hmm.
experience of that. I mean, I didn't know what Dalcroze was when I was a music student. When I was a
Mm-hmm.
student, I didn't encounter it until I became a teacher. Um, and in some ways, it made so much logical sense when it was explained to me and I first saw it. It made so much sense to me because I thought, well, of course, great musicians move.
Mm-hmm.
Like the great musicians, if you watch them, they move. I mean, they're not. It's not a static, standing still thing. I mean, it's some of the movements are quite subtle, but when you really start to watch what musicality is, it's a physical whole body thing, not just the mechanics of the technique. I mean, that is important, but there's music making and then there's musicality, I guess is the other
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
too. And so it does feel very it feels good. It's the other thing. I mean, for children that experience it, it feels good to be in sync with the music.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I love the way too the classes would evolve. I would do a lot with imagery in my classes because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's important for the children, and it's also bringing in things that are beautiful for them to see. Like I was just really big on bringing in, beautiful photos of horses and photos of nature and photos of birds, and we would become all these things in our class time together, and I would play for it, and then we would improvise together using instruments, and we'd sing together at the piano, and we'd make up stories. And I think that it becomes now I'm thinking it's like me with Firebird, when I was
Yeah.
little. It's very much that same thing. And reliving that, having those experiences, galloping around the room, trotting around the room, skipping, and having the music really right there. I remember a person who I consider my mentor because I went on and got my Dalcroze certificate and so forth. And she would also say, yeah, when the children are moving and you are right with them, I'm not looking at my hands at the keyboard. I am watching that child and I am improvising and playing for that child in a way that child feels my teacher understands me. My teacher
Uh-huh.
gets me. My teacher is right there for me, and we are
Uh-huh.
totally in sync. And so in our classes together, I also would think, in terms of like the assessment of what we were doing, like all of the musical concepts of what the children were learning. There's that, but then there's also on a I think on another level is what are those feelings and memories the children are going to have that maybe they can draw upon 10, 20, 30, 40 years later from that time we all had together in that little community of music makers, creating, making music, sitting together at the wooden cabinet that we named our stable, and where they're looking at these beautiful photos of horses, and we're playing this drum, and the drum is now inspiring them to take off and to go gallop, and then to gallop with this great speed, and then to slowly come come back,
Yeah.
you know, what are those memories? And it's like, you know, that they love music, that they cherish that time, that they feel the music in their bodies, and that eventually, you know, if they play an instrument, they're going to recall these
Yes.
feelings and these memories.
Yeah, and so much of our memories having to do with music and the psychology around that has to do with the emotions we feel
Mm-hmm.
in those moments, you know, in those young formative emotions. Like you remember Firebird and that experience probably because of the way it made you feel,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the moment, the joy that it brought
Mm-hmm.
you in the moment of feeling that. And that's why it's so vivid to you. And so when you work with really young children who are able to tap into their creativity in that way, and then you give them an opportunity, you're really essentially supporting what feels natural to them and what feels good to them. You're creating also this feeling of joy and this positive emotion around music. I think that has a lot to do with image formation of someone really seeing themselves as a musician has a lot to do with these positive early experiences, of course, right? Like you see yourself, you feel good in this environment, you feel successful in this environment. And so you therefore you belong in this environment. I am a musician. I am a part of this, again, community of musicians. And so like you knew you wanted to be a musician from a very young age. And I think that's a powerful thing that we can provide as educators for young children is feeling as if you belong, feeling that,
Exactly.
yeah, that I'm getting a little too, lofty in my talk now, but I think
No.
I think that's a big part of the job, really,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, is providing opportunities to feel positive inclusion um, for everybody in the community of artists that we are a part of, so that they can see themselves in that community. And that's
Yeah.
how we, you know, make goals and dreams for ourselves because we
Mm-hmm.
see that we feel that we belong there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in working with young children, I mean, I work with a lot of young children and I know you have too, and they're so open creatively, right? That's the beautiful thing. I think why I'm so attracted to working with young children too is because they're still so open to every possibility. It's a what if time of life, right? Do you find the same openness when you've worked with older students? Are they able to tap into that freedom and creativity if you start working with a group of, say, middle schoolers or high schoolers or university students who have never felt that before? How is it different?
Well, you know, most of my work was focused or is focused on young children and then also teacher training. So
Yeah, adults. Yep.
I could speak to the adult piece.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and also I should say that my work centered on those age groups because that's that's what evolved over time, and it's also what I was really, really drawn to. So I think, you know, in working with adults and working as a teacher trainer and developing creativity in adults or their innate creativity and their innate musicianship and so forth, I think that it all starts with the culture that you create in the space for them to feel comfortable being able to open up and take risks and to know that whatever they are doing in terms of their singing, their moving, their playing, their um, improvising with sound, it's all okay. And we're on this journey together. So I, and you know, Caroline, I did a lot of work, such a highlight of my life, working with adults over several decades, teaching adult classes every single semester, working with adults that have not chosen music as their path, but have chosen education as their path. And so our time together was spent on teaching them to find to develop their innate musicality and their confidence so that they could teach music to children and that they would become the classroom teacher just on the innate gifts that they have with being able to sing, to move, to play a drum, and to really give them the background in the musical development of children, to give them the repertoire that was going to be really meaningful for them to use, to help them learn how to develop lessons that were going to be meaningful, how to assess their work, how to facilitate their work. So I, again, like just amazing memories of, teachers who have not been in that space, being creative and being really musical, opening up and becoming really musical and feeling really good about it. And so just continuing to nurture that, and it's been so amazing for me too, to do a lot of site visits over the years, to go and then see this work in action.
Go into the schools.
Go into the schools and visit with these teachers who, it takes a lot to say, come and see me, come and sit on that little chair in the corner and watch me. Now I'm going to teach music to children, and to go and watch them. And just like, I'm sitting there melting and I want to applaud, everything that they're doing, because they've really taken it and made it their own. And they're sitting there with these school-made instruments that their children made, and they're singing the songs, and it's all a cappella, and they're moving together, and they're doing it. So I think it starts with the environment. It really starts with creating an environment where people are so excited to put a toe in the water, and then to stand in the water, and then jump in the water, and to do their own thing, and know that they're going to be supported, and to not,
like you said,
not
where
be
it's
fearful.
all okay. Yeah,
it's all
fear.
okay. Like, don't be fearful, And when you think too about, for us as musicians and educators and leaders, it's the teachers we've had in our lives, that support our work, that say, I loved reading what you wrote. Let's talk about it. Or, whatever it is, I love the way you played that. That was so beautiful. It's like, it just continues to make you want to open up and do more and more and more.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the good stuff.
That's the good stuff.
It's the good stuff. That's why we kind of all do it, right? Like there's I think that the technical aspects of making music can be really satisfying. I mean, like just like the note playing or the note singing can be satisfying in the sense of, when you master a new skill that was particularly difficult, or you master a passage of a piece, you work the fingering out so that now it flows well, and you play it with ease. Or, now I could hit this note that I couldn't hit before, and I'm getting a much better tone. I mean, those technical aspects are satisfying, but the real satisfying stuff is when you start to be able to put your own expression onto it, and you really start to be able to send a message or tell a story or find your personal way of, making those choices. And I've found working with teachers that they're able to achieve the technical skills if they just focus on the other thing. If they focus on the communication and the message and the joy and the connection with the children and choosing music that speaks to them that they really like, then they end up being more likely to then achieve the technical skills that are required to go along with that. And if you make that the primary driver, and choosing music that they really love to share with the children, not just the music they're supposed to learn, but the music they really love and what speaks to them. If they focus on that, then they achieve the technical stuff. They're able to better achieve.
Such a good point.
Yeah, they're able to. They're more compelled to practice. That stuff comes more naturally to you if you focus on the creative aspects. That's what I found working with adults. adult beginners, I should say, who may not be trained musicians, they find it through the musicality, through the good stuff.
Yeah. And, you think about that too, like, not having studied as a child or a teenager, and then for an adult to want to do this, like,
Yes.
That's amazing, right?
Something brought
You
them
think
there,
about,
right?
right?
Yeah. The
Just
reasons that
to,
they came. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So now, I mean, I'm sure you probably miss those classes. That's probably something that you
I
miss about
do.
your teaching life. Yeah.
I really do. I really miss the adult classes, because I'll tell you, that whole program, that was a really, really long time. So, several decades worth. And
A lot
I
of work.
taught, you know, every single semester, all those years, with the exception of some time when it wasn't working. We couldn't do it because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
But the courses, they over time continue to evolve and evolve in new and exciting ways. But the essence of why we were gathered there remained, constant through all those years. Caroline, I was thinking too that one of the things that that was on my mind in our school work together the last year that I was at school was the conversations we had around what is the value of music study.
Yeah.
Right? Because I just,
The point of all of this.
yeah, what is the point of
Yeah.
all this?
Mm-hmm.
Because I felt that, there, what is the value of music study, and how can we then organize and bring together and structure what it is that we're all thinking and feeling and saying in a way that it can be shared with others. And
Yes.
I feel really good that we got to that as a group, and we were able to really talk about that, because we had spent a long time talking about the importance of music in our lives. And the importance of music in our lives and the value of music study, there is overlap, but they're not the same thing. Right?
Exactly. And it's a difficult thing to articulate to people who haven't experienced it. So it was something we felt like we all understood, but figuring out how to articulate that in a way that was meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a challenge for arts education in general, is articulating that message. We often find ourselves on our back foot, being secondary to other types of education, because it becomes that, it gets, this because I've said this to you before, but it really gets under my skin when people start to say things like, well, you should study music because it makes you better in your academics. Mm-hmm. Or you should, that you should focus on art because then you'll be better at this other thing that, first of all, that's not proven to be true. And that always bugs me because it's just not true. But it's like, no, you should focus on these things because it makes you better at those things. You should focus on, the only thing we know for a fact that studying music makes you better at is music. Mm-hmm. That should be enough.
And it is.
And it is. We have to keep sort of,
I know.
That's enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's enough. Like the pursuit of artistry is enough. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be, because it gets you, because you're going to be a surgeon if you study this, which is not true, listener. Don't that's not true if anybody tells you that. It's just the pursuit of our own excellence, our own deeper thinking, expanding our capacity as humans, expanding our capacity to communicate through all these various languages, music, art, dance, expression, right? That should be enough.
Yeah. And when we and it is enough, right?
You and
when
I
we,
agree. You and I agree
for
here.
us, it is, when we first started talking about it too, because I just really wanted to get at this question, like, what is the
Why?
value, right? Of
What's the value
why
of that?
music study? And there had to be a way into it. So we talked about, like, what first drew you, to
Mhm.
study music. What are your earliest memories of music study? And as a faculty, that's how we entered the conversation. And right away, it goes right to your heart, right? So
Yeah.
everyone had something to say. Everyone was writing, because we weren't all up in our heads about it, right? We were thinking about how it affected us as young
Mhm.
children and how we were drawn in. And then we talked about, if we were to really sort of flesh this out as an entire faculty, what would be the most important things to share? And then for us as individual musicians, why do we keep doing this? And what kept coming through was the ongoing growth and exploration. It's ongoing growth and exploration. And that's
Yeah.
what continues to feed us, by being musicians, by being creators and makers of music.
The compulsion to continue to make
Yep.
things.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all have that. And that the
Mm-hmm.
people that have stayed in the field, in any arts field, are the people that are continually compelled to keep learning and developing and shaping. And the thing about being a musician is that you really don't ever stop. You're not ever finished.
That's why I'm not retired.
No,
I'm not
you're
retired,
not.
retired.
You're
I
not. You're not
retired, right?
we have
You
the
never
capacity.
stop.
Yeah, we never stop. We have the capacity to continue to get better. Even
Mm-hmm.
those of us who don't practice as much as we should, that's who I'm talking about, myself right now. I know that I have the capacity to improve,
Mm-hmm.
and to continue to get better, and my potential is unlimited, if you really want to think about it that way,
Yeah.
that I could continue to expand my abilities indefinitely until the end of my life if I wanted to. When you were composing your piece, how did you know that it was done?
Oh, that's such a good question. Um, well, I think there were different phases of done. There was the first done, when it was I had it was entirely sketched out, and all the harmonies were in, and all of that was done, and the refrain came back 3 times, um, and then there was, like, the next layer. The setting of the text was challenging for me, like,
Mm,
because there were so many different voices, and making sure that when I was hearing it vertically and how that was all lining up, that was all going to work. And then also horizontally, as the music's moving forward. But then, once I got it all entered into the score, and then just really, then you sort of go deeper and deeper and deeper, and you've got to make sure, like, every little dot and every little marking really makes sense. And then I just got to a point where I knew, yeah, this is it. And it got to, like, wait a minute, there's one note that shouldn't be doubled there.
the
That's not
minutia,
right.
tiny
Yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
it was like just the real tiny, tiny stuff. Um, yeah, but I felt great about it. I really did, and I love the piece. So it makes me want to write a lot more. It really does. I really feel that, and I mentioned when we started our conversation, I have 2 sisters, and they're both artists.
Yeah.
Um, and my sister in LA is a ceramic artist, and she's phenomenal with her art. And so was my older sister, who's here on the East Coast. But my
Yeah.
younger sister said to me, she calls me Kier, when I started writing, she said, "You're doing it. You're doing it. You're now on to the next phase. You're doing it. Here you are. You're creating new work."
Yeah.
And I'm really excited, you know. So for me now, I'm practicing.
Yeah.
I will, I'll perform here and there,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm composing, and and all of this takes time, and
Yeah.
time was the thing that I didn't have before. You need to be in that kind of flow of writing and sitting down. I want to be able to sit there and say, I'm not hungry. I don't need to wash my face. It's all okay. I can just keep
I don't have
going.
anywhere I have to be. No
I
one
don't
is
have
missing.
anywhere I have to go. Right. Exactly. That, oh my gosh, 3 hours passed. I had no idea,
Well, that's flow. That's real
Right.
flow there.
So
Where you lose all track of time and you just.
yeah. And it's just,
Mhm.
it's really good.
Do you like to keep that routine every day? Practice every day, compose
I
every
do.
day?
I do. I do. I have, so actually, I like to practice every day. I haven't, it's been a couple of weeks since I've focused on composing anything because I'm now thinking of the next text. So it's going to be text driven, and it's finding the right text. And I'm also thinking about when I want to have it performed and what's going to be the right text for that time and that setting, you know. And again, and then all of this takes time. Yeah, you can sit down and you can write something out in a week and just have it be done. I mean, I've certainly done pieces like that, but this is something, if you're writing like 5 minutes of music that's scored for something larger, you know, yeah, it really takes time.
Well, I can imagine there's a bit of letting it marinate with you too. Like you get something down on paper and then you want to play it or hear it
Mm-hmm.
so that you can absorb if it's working.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
multiple
Yeah.
parts to all this. You need to
Yeah.
kind of listen. You need to listen.
You do need to listen. And so you write, and then you take breaks and you come back, and then it's like, oh yeah, what was I thinking there? Why was I thinking that? Right. And now you come back into it, and you modify it and you continue to develop it. And then when it takes off, it's really exciting. So I feel, I, I feel really certain that the next piece, it's going to be for choir and piano.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
You
Mm-hmm.
you were always a musician your whole
Mm-hmm.
life long.
Mm-hmm.
Were you always creative?
Um, I think so. I really do. I
Is that a
actually,
strange question?
I actually think I spent a lot of time daydreaming, just always thinking about
Me too.
things like what they could be. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
I
You're
do
the
that now.
same way. Yeah.
Same
Like a
way.
lot of time
Whole life. Yep.
just daydreaming.
Mhm.
Um, mhm.
Yeah. They used to make fun of me on my soccer team because I would be in the goal dancing and singing something in my head and not paying attention to the game, and the ball would go right past me, and I would be
Oh,
like
what? Right.
daydreaming in the goal. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Caroline, I can totally relate. I
Yeah.
totally relate. It's like, what? I was
Yeah.
just thinking about this other thing, like
Yeah.
daydreaming
In my own
about
world.
something.
Yeah. So my
Yeah.
soccer career didn't last,
No,
but that's
but
okay.
that's okay because you're a musician.
Found something else.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Kier, thank you so much for
I
spending
love
this
talking to
time.
you.
Great to talk to you. It's great to see you.
So great to see you. So great to talk.
Kirsten, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. If you'd like to know more about Kirsten and what she's up to, you can visit our website. It's www.arts-collab.com/creative life pod. Thanks for listening, everybody. Until next time, keep making stuff. Bye.